Hi there, this is Sean, the Honest Book Reviewer, with another book review. In this video, we're discussing Richard Lehmann's Night in the Lonesome October. Here's the book. This is a horror novel. I think of it more as a quirky horror, almost comedy horror sometimes. I think it shows that Richard Lehmann plays on a different level than other horror novelists. He's got his own thing going on in his writing, and in this book especially, there's one unique element that I've never seen in other books before, and I found it quite fun, quite engaging in this book. And for me, it's probably the standout element, and it makes this book so memorable for me. I thought it was quite a good horror novel for him. One of his probably middle-range novels or better novels that I've reread anyway as I'm going through the books on my shelf. Let's discuss it in more detail now. Like I mentioned in the brief introduction, the plot of this book is less about horror and more about some quirky, fun elements going on. So in the main story, we have Ed. Ed is broken up with his girlfriend Holly. She dumped him. So he's quite down in the dumps about it. He's quite morose. To make himself feel better, take his mind off things, he decides to go for a walk. In the middle of the night, he decides to go and get donuts. And the donut shop he's going to is about 7 miles away. So it's quite a long walk in the dark. On the way to the donut shop, he comes across Eileen, who is one of Holly's friends. They chat a bit. He mentions he's going to the donut shop, and then they just part ways. He doesn't really think about that meeting on his way to the shop. But on his way to the donut shop, he comes across many quirky characters who are out at night. And if this book tells you anything, as that Richard Lehmann wants us to believe, that at night all the crazies come out, all the quirky characters come out. We have an old lady who rides a bicycle, and she just rides at people, and if you don't get out of the way, she'll run into you. We've got this guy walking a dog. Ed tries to talk to the dogs. The guy says, "Don't talk to my dogs, they don't like to be spoken to." We've got other quirky characters as well, and just some normal characters that seem normal, but you just never know when he comes across somebody if they're going to be normal or not. He also comes across this girl, and she seems to be about his age, maybe a year or two younger, and she's wandering around the streets as well. He's fascinated by this girl for some reason. I'm not really sure why at the start, but he starts to follow her, and in his mind he justifies it by thinking, well, this is on my way to the donut shop. If I just go out of my way a little bit, I'm still going towards the donut shop, so it's not really stalking this girl, it's not really following her. So he keeps following her, and then she just goes into a front yard and into a house, and he thinks it's her house. He just hangs around a little bit for a few minutes. He's wondering, should he look in a window? Is that bad if I look in a window? Will I get caught? People will think I'm a stalker or a peeping Tom. All these thoughts play out in his mind. So you wonder, what sort of mind frame is he in to think that he can start peeping through windows in the first place? What kind of character is Ed? Is he a normal person? I wonder about Ed sometimes, because in this book, he does act in ways that make him seem a bit stalkerish, make him seem a bit odd. But anyway, he gets to the donut shop and Eileen is there waiting for him. They chat a bit, they drive off together, and then they end up hooking up that night. And from then on, Eileen thinks they're in a relationship, it seems. Ed's not too sure. He's playing along with it, trying to work out whether they are or not. But in his mind, the whole time, he's obsessed with this girl he saw walking the streets at night, and he starts going out at different nights to try to find her again. And as he's going out, he comes across different things as well during the night, and that's explained in the book. On a return trip to the donut shop, he comes across this guy called Randy, and Randy is bad news. Randy admits to Ed that he liked the look of Eileen, and he admits that he wants to capture Eileen, kidnap her, and basically abuse her. Ed is trying to get away from Randy. Randy doesn't make it easy, and there's a few things happening in this scene. I won't explain everything. Ed manages to get away, but from then on, as he's venturing out at night, the thought of Randy's on his mind. Is Randy going to come across Ed again? Is Randy going to hurt Ed? Is Randy going to force Ed to take Randy to see Eileen? So as he's travelling around at night, walking the streets, he's always worried that he'll come across this guy again, this dangerous guy, who's basically admitting that he wants to kidnap women and abuse them. There's one horror element that Lehman introduced into this book, and then he forgot about it and didn't bring it back really at all. And that's in this one moment where Ed and Eileen are under a bridge. It's a very dark bridge. They can't see anything. So they're under this bridge, and then suddenly they start being attacked. And it seems like they're being attacked by more than one person. It could be a group of people. They're not sure how many. All they know is they can feel hands on them, hands pulling them this way and that. They get away, and in the process of getting away, Ed thinks he's hurt one of them, killed one of them. And then when they do get away, they realise Eileen hasn't got her bag, her handbag with her wallet, with her ID, all sorts of things that could lead these people to know where she lives. So Ed decides to go back to get her belongings. When he goes back there, he's only got a matchbook for a light. So he's striking matches, trying to find her possessions, and then he sees in this light, what he thinks he sees is a group of people munching on this human body. He hightails it out of there, grabs her handbag, hightails it out of there, and then, from then on, they're petrified of going under bridges again. And that plays out a little bit, those thoughts play a little bit through the book, but that whole thing about those people under the bridge, it's kind of forgotten on the whole through the rest of the book until almost the very end. And I think that's a miss for Lehman. I think Lehman could have extended that a bit more. It kind of didn't make sense to the rest of the story. And Lehman has this thing in his books where sometimes his horror elements don't always make sense to the rest of the story. But on this occasion, to make it a horror, he should have extended this and had that play out more through the book. The unique element in this book, and it comes across as being quite fun, even though it's something you'd never do in real life, is that Ed finally catches up with this girl that's, going to people's houses, or he thinks she went into her own house. He finds out that she just goes into houses at random, and she'll go into a house, eat their food, drink their drink, sometimes sleep in their bed or on their couch, spend time in their house, and then leave. And this girl, Casey, invites Ed into her world, and he starts doing that with her. Going into people's houses, doing all those things, and then leaving. And what he also finds out is some of the people who live in these houses are aware of this. They get to know Casey, and they invite her into their home, let her do that. And they're happy to have her come into their home and spend time there. That's quite unusual, very unique, very odd, but also very quirky. And it's something I've never seen in books before or since. And I thought it was just a fun element in the book, even though it's something nobody would ever do, really. Would you really go and walk into strangers' houses in the middle of the night? I know it's not something I would do, not in a million years. But in this book, it comes across as just a really fun element. The conclusion of this book is Lehman at his truest self, but it also draws all the elements very neatly together. I think it was a good ending, a good conclusion, and in true Lehman fashion, it gets a bit over the top, but it made sense for this book. And I'm glad that it tied everything together neatly, and even brought some of the things throughout the novel that were missing out back to the end of the story. I thought that was a good ending, and I thought Lehman did a good job with that. Ed, who's our main character, look, I don't think he's the most likeable main character in a book. He comes across as a bit of a jerk sometimes with the way he treats people, and just the way he goes about trying to justify his actions and behaviour in this book. Sometimes you wonder what kind of character he is. Also, I didn't really buy into the fact that there's so many people in the book who find him irresistible. Is he really that good looking? Is he really that charming? Why have we got so many people who find him irresistible in this book? They seemed a bit overdone, seemed a bit juvenile in a way, and it didn't make sense to the rest of the story. Eileen is very one-dimensional in this book. She comes across as a bit of a bunny boiler. She's very over the top, very intense, and she almost admits that she is been stalking Ed herself. She's had him in her sights for a long time and she finally has a chance to get her hooks into him. That's what she almost admits in this book, and it comes across that way as well throughout the story. So she's very one-dimensional, but that one dimension is very intense and almost scary in some ways. So I don't know if Layman created this character deliberately to seem like that, but in my view, she could be somebody that could be very dangerous if Ed was to say no to her, to shut off that relationship chance. I think that character would have a chance to snap and something happen between her and Ed. Casey is the weird, quirky character, and it fits the weird, quirky vibe of the book. So in that sense, she comes across as probably the best character to fit the story. Again, she's not fully well-rounded. She's a little bit one-dimensional sometimes. She's got a bit more light and shade in her, a bit more depth than the other characters, I think. And just that quirky side of her, in a way that fits the story, makes her stand out and makes her a little bit believable in the essence of the story, even though she wouldn't be believable in any other story or any other walk of life, in reality. In this story, she is more well-rounded than the other characters. While not being a really true horror, being a more comedy horror or quirky horror, this is a good Layman book. It's better than average for Layman, and I rate it a 3 out of 5. I did like the fun elements, the elements that seemed a bit quirky and unique. They made this book and this read a bit more enjoyable, and it's a little bit slow going though at the start. It takes a little bit of time to get to some of the best moments in the book. But if you can put up with that, I think you will enjoy this read. It feels almost like a road trip read, if that makes sense, and has kind of this laid-back vibe to it. We have a few little elements that are a bit shocking, a few scenes that are a bit more edge of the seat, but most of it has this kind of laid-back road trip vibe. That's what I get from this book. I do review other Richard Layman books on my channel. If you don't want to miss out on those videos, check out my channel and subscribe. I also have a horror playlist on my channel. It should be on your screen now.